It doesn't matter if you're a Cohen era fan, if you're a Claremont era fan, if you're a fan of 90s X-Men or 2000s X-Men, everybody agrees From the Ashes sucks. It does appear that Tom Brevoort was the absolute wrong person for this job. And it feels like there's no love there. He's got no spark for the X-Men. He didn't say one thing of consequence, I think, during the entire interview. Even CBR, the biggest shills of the biggest shills out there, are noticing that the X-Men From the Ashes era is basically fucked. They had an article about it this week.
In retrospect, the Colors era is not that bad compared to this. If there's one thing I can say about the last, 8 to 10 years of X-Men, God damn, y'all made Chuck Austin look like a fucking superstar.
And this is the audience that they purposely went out there and found, and they don't support comic books, and they basically just destroyed the sales doing it. This week we got X-Men Monday, number 300, which really did demonstrate just how dead the X-Men franchise is, as well as other people like CBR commenting that X-Men is not in a very healthy place right now. When I went in there and started reading the Adventures in Poor Taste 300th episode, whatever, it's supposed to be a special, I was just taken aback about how many people were not asking about the current state of X-Men comic books, what the heroes were doing. They were only asking really about shipping questions. Who's fucking who? Who's going to be dating who? When is this couple coming back?
The audience that they're cultivating only seems to care about who's fucking who. 90% of the time, they only seem to care about the same-sex relationships. They merely tolerate the long-standing Jean and Scott relationships.
Nobody's asking about the adventures. Nobody's really asking about the characters. They're only talking about the relationships. And even those fans, you can tell through the questions that were presented, they're not happy with X-Men From the Ashes either.
No, they're really not. Their only concern is, when am I going to get more Betsy and Rachel? That seems to be the main through line. And the fact is, I think Betsy has never been less popular than she is right now. And that seems to be the only recurring thing.
And I think if you go back in time and look at the letters pages and what people were talking about when the X-Men were a very healthy franchise, certainly during the 80s, in the 90s, even the early 2000s, sure, people would have asked about Scott and Jean. They would have asked about Storm and Forge, maybe some of these relationships that are in there. But far bigger than that would have been all the questions about, hey, what are the X-Men going to do next? Is somebody else going to join the team? What about this villain that we haven't seen in a while? There's literally no talk about any of this stuff. And this is the audience that they purposely went out there and found, and they don't support comic books, and they basically just destroyed the sales doing it.
You're 100% correct. It seems like the only time that they're concerned about future plot is when it's who's going to be starting to screw who, or when is my canceled book of gay fanfic going to be reincarnated as a different book on gay fanfic. That is not an audience that really likes to spend money.
Absolutely. And it does appear that Tom Brevoort was the absolute wrong person for this job. He's sitting there answering questions, and it feels like there's no love there. He's got no spark for the X-Men. He didn't say one thing of consequence, I think, during the entire interview.
No, he really did not. He didn't talk about any books that were coming. He talked around all the cancellations. He did his usual, oh, well, everybody likes things for different reasons. We're never going to make everybody happy, so we're not even going to try. Now, the only thing that I did see that was in there that was something he kind of repeatedly hammered on was the fact that the audience that is claiming to love things isn't fucking buying it. And that's why all the books that they quote unquote love and they're super sad to see go away are going away. He talks about it, but at the same time refuses to say, well, if this doesn't work, maybe we should just go back to giving people the things back when they were actually buying it. The longtime kind of normie X fan, they pushed us so far away so long ago that we're done even bothering to ask questions. We know we're not going to get an answer. The answer we're going to get sucks, and we're going to be very disappointed even if we do get an answer. Tom Brevoort talks about how, well, this is kind of the monkey's paw of being an X-Men fan. Yeah, we might give you the character you want, and that you've been aching to see, but we're going to do it in a way that you fucking hate. And he even admits it throughout this article. Now, I don't think he's admitting, yes, we do this intentionally, but it's also kind of a tacit admission that they're doing it intentionally.
Even CBR, the biggest shills of the biggest shills out there, are noticing that the X-Men from the Ashes era is basically fucked. They had an article about it this week, basically stating that the X-Men comics under Tom Brevoort's leadership, part of the new From the Ashes reboot, are struggling. There's a real sense of creative stagnation. The energy and momentum that once defined the X-Men just isn't there. For many fans, the From the Ashes era relaunch has actually made things worse. Instead of building on the momentum of House of X in 2019, it feels like the franchise has lost its direction completely. Brevoort promised that each title would have its own distinct tone and speak to different kinds of X-Men fans, but in practice, very few of these books feel like true X-Men stories. The line feels fragmented, stories lack cohesion, and there's no central vision pulling everything together. It's starting to feel like the franchise is stuck in a holding pattern. Some fans are speculating this might be intentional, that Marvel is stalling until they can tie the comics in the inevitable MCU debut of the X-Men. But even the shills out there are noticing, hey, this is worse than when we started with House of X. How did we go back to the Colors era and make it worse than that?
In retrospect, the Colors era is not that bad compared to this. If there's one thing I can say about the last, 8 to 10 years of X-Men, god damn, y'all made Chuck Austin look like a fucking superstar. Even the shills are admitting that there's a problem. Yes, they left Krakoa, but at the same time, they've spent about 25 and 50% of page real estate throughout this, lamenting the fact that they're not in Krakoa anymore. Krakoa has become the Poochie of X-Men comics, where anytime they're not on Krakoa, they have to be talking about Krakoa and wondering where Krakoa is and why they miss it so much.
And there is no direction other than looking back.
They weren't attempting to actually create a new direction of X-Men after Krakoa, nor were they intending or trying to give a diversity of books. No, they were just throwing a temper tantrum. And I think the readers picked that up pretty fucking quick. They don't seem to know where they want to go. They just know where they'd rather be. But where they rather be wasn't successful enough to justify continuing it.
And you can tell Tom Brevoort would rather be doing Avengers because he's treating the X-Men like the Avengers books. The Avengers books are a bunch of solo heroes coming together and fighting together sometimes. The X-Men is a team book that can splinter off and do solo books sometimes.
And let's be honest, the most successful eras of the X franchise, outside of X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, kind of working towards similar goals. X-Factor, X-Force, solo Wolverine book, Excalibur, they were all telling very, very, very different stories if you go back to the 80s and 90s. However, they did still have a central theme of trying to stop bad mutants and protecting a world that hates and fears them. They might have very different themes, whereas X-Force was more of the renegade team, X-Factor was the government team or the public-facing team. The X-Men were more of the core team and the central
but it all fit together. It made sense in one line. None of this fits together.
No, most of this, that's the problem. They said they were doing an X-Men book for everybody. Except for the problem is when you put those things together, they don't work. They feel like they're entirely different universes.
And the situation looks even worse when you look at the cancellation rate. Within the first year of the reboot, Marvel has already canceled at least 5 titles. X-Force, X-Factor, NYX were all cut short at issue 10. Now Magic and Psylocke have joined them. That's a huge failure rate for a relaunch this ambitious. Worse, many of these titles didn't even get proper endings. Storylines were left hanging. And it's clear Marvel didn't believe these books could hold a consistent readership. The takeaway, there's a serious disconnect between editorial vision and what X-Men fans actually want. Sales aren't living up to expectations, and the new era hasn't established a clear identity to replace the Krakoan era. And that's just the first 5 books. I don't believe Phoenix, Storm, Exceptional X-Men will make it through this year. There's no way.
No, I don't think that they get more than another 2 issues, maybe 3 max. There was a lot of us that said when this line launched, that's way too many books by way too many jabronis with way too many solo characters that can't carry books. And we were all told that we were sexist, racist, or dumb. And guess what? We were right. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. And considering that the only characters in the X Office that have ever been able to carry a solo title are Wolverine, Cable, and Deadpool, pretty fucking obvious that none of the rest of these, other than Wolverine, was going to succeed.
What's weird, talk about past behavior. X-Force has been a series that has longevity. It ended in 10 issues. That's an enormous failure.
But that's because you had a jabroni on it, Jeffrey Thorne. Then NYX. That's a series that had 7 issues the first time.
So I guess it's a success this time. It made it to 10.
Well, there was a second NYX series that I think might have also had 6 issues or something like that. And this one made it to 10. But considering that it's not NYX, it's a Kamala Khan and Friends book that just got the name NYX.
I wouldn't expect any one of these titles, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, not even the top 3, the big name titles out there. I don't think any of them will sniff 50 issues.
No, absolutely not. They're going to relaunch those by issue 24. They're going to relaunch them, and then they're just going to call it a new line-wide direction change. And that's going to justify it. But they're just going to talk about how, well, we wanted to refresh it. They've been in this new paradigm for a couple of years, and that was kind of a transitionary period away from Krakoa towards new paradigm that they're going to come out of left field with, and that still won't make sense, will still piss off most of the readers and still not sell, but then they'll retroactively call the From the Ashes period what was a transitional period.
But I think Tom Brevoort is proper fucked here, because Gail Simone was the best person he could get for Uncanny fucking X-Men. 9 people said no. He finally settles on Gail. When he does the refresh, he's either going to have to keep Gail, which is a terrible idea, or get somebody lesser.
Yeah, and I think he keeps Gail. And honestly, when they do their quote-unquote refresh on the line, it'll be the exact same creatives telling the exact same stories, but call it something else and try to gaslight us into believing that it's different.
I will give Tom Brevoort this. He has achieved something, Doc. It doesn't matter if you're a Krakoan era fan, if you're a Claremont era fan, if you're a fan of 90s X-Men or 2000s X-Men. Everybody fucking agrees From the Ashes sucks.
Absolutely. No matter what era you got in, you could be the Outback era, you could be the Phoenix era, you could be Original 5 era. Nobody wants to read this fucking From the Ashes. Nobody's enjoying it, and nobody is happy with the results. But as Tom says, you can't make anybody happy. You can't even make 80% of them happy. So instead, he's going to try to make 80% of them unhappy.
Well, he's succeeding. Well, I think he's got a higher rate, though. It's probably like a 95% hit rate. You can get the fully uncensored version of this along with our review of Uncanny X-Men number 16 from Gail Simone. Another example of just how failed this X-Men From the Ashes line is on Think Critical Patreon. The Doc Unfiltered podcast, definitely want to see you there, because we got some fantastic stuff we had to cut out of here because Doc's just a little too hot to handle.